Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Thanks for waiting for us to get started. Some of our interior design studios end at 7, so we usually start these lectures a little bit late this semester. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amy Campos. I coordinate the lecture series here, the interior design lecture series. And this is the second of our lectures this semester. We have Erik Flatmo joining us tonight. Erik is a San Francisco-based set designer working in theater, opera, and dance. His work engages performative spatial effect at a level of detail that most interior design projects can only hope for. He works closely with playwrights, choreographers, and production designers to create narrative space. These are often singular spaces that can transform through the precise control of lighting, texture, and materiality to produce highly varied, sequential, expressive environments that act as contextual scaffolds for the stories and performances taking place in them. Erik has worked with many companies, including the American Conservatory Theatre, the Berkeley and San Jose Repertory Theaters, the Yale Repertory Theatre, San Francisco Opera, among many others. His work has debuted all over the world, including Poland, France, Germany, Sweden, Mexico, and all over the US. He is currently working on a production with ACT in San Francisco called 4,000 Miles. He also teaches at Stanford University, and his background is in architecture and drama. He went to Columbia University for architecture, and then he studied drama at Yale for his master's. So with all of this work going on, we're very lucky to have him here tonight. So please join me in welcoming him to CCA.
Hi, thanks for coming. So I'm Erik, obviously, and I design scenery for plays, operas, and dance. And when people ask me what I do, that's actually pretty much what I say is I design scenery for plays, opera, and dance. Because the term set designer is a little funny when you go to Europe, you'd say scenographer is kind of the term, which is a little fancier, but if you say it in the US, I think you sound like you're being a little elitist. Yeah, but it's a job, and you don't make a lot of money, but unless you work in film, maybe, or do event production. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what I do, and I'm going to show you kind of a range of the projects that I've worked on, and then I'm also going to talk about one project in particular in depth. Not that it's the fanciest project I ever did, but that I have a lot of material to talk about, and I think all of you probably can relate to it if you went to high school before, because it deals with a play set in high school. And then this is not going to be a very theoretical talk. I would say in general, when I design scenery, I see myself very much as a problem solver. I'm trying to solve the problems of that particular text and those particular performers for that particular company and that particular budget. And there may be some, you'll see a range of projects, and I think there are some that maybe express me more, my inner self or something, but I never worry about that. I just kind of do what I do. So the slide you're looking at right here, this is for a play. This was actually in San Francisco called The Imaginary Invalid, which is a play by Molière, which is a 17th century playwright. And it deals with a man, so this guy believes he's sick, and the whole sort of world revolves around him. And this is a play that's been done a lot recently by a lot of theater companies in the US, and typically it seems people have done it they've taken it out of the period or context for when it was written, and the director I was working with wanted to keep it there. But what I decided to do was to place it in a circular room, because the whole world revolves around the central character, who's really sort of an egomaniac. But you'll notice that the rest of the detail is strictly, it's all based on 17th century French research. The floor was just a parquet. What I remember particularly about this project was that I felt very strongly that the ground plan should be a pure circle. And if you know, I don't know a lot about this, but if you take a cylinder and then cut it at an angle, such as the floor is cutting the circular circle that's implied by the walls here, that actually doesn't form. What you end up with is an ellipse. So I ended up having a structural engineer I used to work for came and sort of helped me figure out the geometry. So this is actually a true circle down here, but then this is an what do you call it? An ellipsoidal column. Yeah, moving on. This is a play. This is a play I did in New York in 2004 called Saint Scarlet. I think this represents another, more naturalistic, so an environment that's trying to look like reality. This play, I would call this in the genre of the white trash plays. So every young set designer gets to do one of those, where it's usually about a family in the Midwest. And this was set in Wisconsin in an Irish-American family. It's living room. That's Rosemary DeWitt, by the way, if you know who she is. And then this was a play I did here locally at the Magic Theater. And this was a play written by Carrie Perloff, who's the artistic director of ACT. And this is called Luminescence Dating. And this play is, this is the central character who is an academic at a university, and she's an archaeologist. And one way that I felt I could breathe life into this play was by researching that environment and trying to give it a real, an exact level of detail. And what I ended up doing was I went to Columbia University for undergrad, and they had an old geology library there, and I photographed that, and I stole a lot of details from that in order to give this archaeology department, a more literal feel. This is the cleaning woman right here. I want to go back here. This play right here that you're seeing, I hope this is I hope this isn't completely uninteresting to you, but this was kind of my big break. Before this, I had done shows at a much smaller scale, and the way that I got this job actually was I had done a lot of work on the junior level at this theater company, and the person that they had originally hired to do this play didn't show up, never called them back. And when they needed somebody to fill in, I happened to be there. And so I just wanted to mention that to you guys, if any of you are wanting to do, I imagine most of you want to do design, but it's really funny how a lot of these things happen. You just got to kind of hang around and be in the right place, and then things sort of fall into place. So this is Richard III that I did for Cal Shakes, which is a theater up in Orinda in the East Bay. The floor, so this is an outdoor amphitheater, if that's not obvious. And this sort of shape here, this is the thrust perimeter of the stage. I forget what year this was, maybe 2008. And then these were toot steel rigs with just, these are actually just desk lights and then just fluorescent tubes. The floor was OSB. It was all raw plywood. There was no paint used in this play in the design. This was a plexi panel right here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Richard III takes place, if you know, at a time of a lot of political of upheaval, putting it mildly. And things were changing, and so I felt that a construction site was a nice metaphor for that. I also like to set it sometimes if I have that feeling, for this, I was like, there's no paint in this. I think all the materials should really just be what they are, and I'm sure there's an exception. There's probably some black paint somewhere, but I find it satisfying stick to certain rules if I can develop them. It's funny looking at this now because lights are really popular right now in design for this stage. And this is the battle scene at the end. And this is a play called A Betty Summer Vacation that I did at Yale Rep. I brought this in just because when I worked on this, I was sort of laughing and saying that the period is early Crate and Barrel, because I wanted it to be. It's supposed to be a rental home in the Hamptons, and I remember a lot of these details, like this ceiling. Doesn't look so good here, but I'd gone to Pajaro Dunes when I was a kid, to the condos there, and just a lot of that sort of California modernism stuck with me. And so I translated that into onto the stage here. The ceiling was cribbed, I guess, from an Eichler, and a sort of beige carpeting and a beige couch. And then this is a play called A Picasso, which is about this is supposed to be a Picasso down here, and a German Gestapo agent. Oh, I messed that up. But I actually brought this in because this is a model. So one thing that I do, and what gets a lot of attention, are these models that we make. So usually I'm expected to make a 1/4-inch color model for each project that I do, and that's contractual. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, but I enjoy it. But I remember, because I studied architecture as an undergrad, and I remember, I don't remember painting models, and so when I went to graduate school, we had to learn how to sort of paint and make things look like the materials they were supposed to represent using like gouache. So like, it's just a different mode of working. I just want to go, this is a little side note, but this was a little copy of a Prouvé light that we did. One sort of fun side note to my job is that there's a lot of great craftspeople that I get to work with, and there's a lot of time that we get to build furniture, and it's really rewarding. And so I can usually bring in a piece of research like that, and we can fake it. This is a play called The Hopper Collection at the Magic, and the interior was cribbed from the Hannah Honeycomb house. So this is, it looks a little ripe here, but it's supposed to be redwood. There's an opera project. I'm going to go, so I've done work that looks very traditional. So I would say this looks like, you'd say like a set, right? Basic box set. In fact, I remember, this is a play called The Constant Wife. When I worked on this, I remember my goal was to do a very conventional set because I wanted to have that experience. Much better. And then this is also at ACT, and this is a play called Scapan, directed by Bill Irwin, and there was this sort of like Italian kind of faux Renaissance streetscape with these signs that popped out of the windows, and I had a lot of fun just sort of cribbing all these details. I'd been to Italy and had taken pictures. And had stolen a lot of these Italian details, as well as borrowing liberally from Fornasetti. I think a lot of you are going to be horrified by saying how much that I copy. That's a huge, there's a lot of looking at research and copying things, which I don't think is quite so horrible. In fact, I think it's a very good thing for you to do. And you'll notice when you copy something, and I'm going to show you some examples of furniture and decorative elements that I've copied, and how, I've just noticed over time how much better my eye gets. It's just a good training to look at something and then have to draw it precisely. For example, this play is called La Bête. This was in Florida. And this scroll work up here, this is a copy of a Dorothy Draper design. And this would be, originally in the Dorothy Draper, this is plaster, white plaster, but they did this out of foam. But I had to look at the research and copy that. Yeah. And this floor is a painted version of malachite. You'll notice these, the Philippe Starck, Louis Couture's chairs from Cartel, which the director had to have, and I thought were very passé. Anyways, let me skip ahead quickly here. This is sort of starting with the work that is closest to my heart. Which I think tends to be a little bit simpler. And so this was a design for a play called Our Town, which I'm sure most of you know because it's one of the most famous plays, right? That deals with an American village or town in New Hampshire and the daily life. And I really felt that the simplicity of that play catered to a certain simplicity of materials. And I felt that inherent in that play was this idea that if you took very simple things and looked at them plainly, that they would have a certain depth and beauty. And so my idea for that was really I just wanted a simple plywood floor. I think this was like 2002. So this is just plywood. It's actually on a rake stage, which means it's higher at the back and lower at the front. It's painted black. And then this is a surround. This probably just looks like chipboard to you. But this is actually a muslin light box. You'll notice, you can see a little bit of the blue in there. So there's actually light within this. I'm going to show you a picture that shows the lighting up a little bit better in a second. But this is a scene in the first act when Emily, the young female protagonist, and her neighbor fall in love, and they go to the soda shop for the first time. And I really wanted to keep it simple, so I just felt like a pipe with a board could represent the soda shop, and having stools that were a little bit too tall to make them look small and make them look innocent. There's a weather vane because you have to have a sort of Americana reference because it's an American classic. I think this is most friendly, but you can see sort of the basic plywood right here. And just making sure like the tables were also made out, they were copied, of course, from a shaker design, but were built and fashioned out of plywood. And just simple Maine style camping stools with just canvas tops. But here, so this is the light blocks glowing from inside. So those of you who design and build will know, obviously, that to get something to look this simple is a lot of work, particularly because anywhere where there's structure, right, you're going to get a shadow. Okay, so in this, like the big concession I had to make was you can see these horizontal seams. Oops. So those are the seams of where they sewed the muslin together, because one of the big issues, of course, was if you wanted to have, if I wanted to have a big, large piece of unseamed muslin, then I couldn't afford the labor that went into making the steel structure the way that it is, so that you don't see the support, which is essentially all offstage. You all understand, like, so this is an entrance. These are entrance for the actors. If there's like obvious things I'm not explaining, just like shout at me and I'll explain them, because, yeah. These up here, so these are, we call them borders, right? So typically, like, probably like our high school or college auditorium, those were black, right? Just like black fabric up at the top. If it's black, it means void, it means nothing. For this show, I wanted to have muslin borders. I felt that that was the language of this piece. Unfortunately, we couldn't make those be light boxes as well. So you'll see in this image, this is blue down here, and it's not look the same. But I think it's a small concession to make. And this was another project I worked on more recently, and I just sort of brought it in because this sort of shape reminded me of some of my earlier work. This in the back lit up. It was a translucency, as we call it. You can see this doesn't have a seam on it. And this floor actually was just routed plywood. I remember I was in a rug store in Palo Alto, and I saw they had a floor like that. It just had rows in it. And I said, why don't we just do that? And we don't have to lay all this. It looked great. And these were actually fabric also that lit up. But they're, that's actually not bad painting. That's light in there. But anyways. This is the first image of a work that I do with a choreographer named Trajal Harrell, who I've done a lot of work with since 2002, and this is the very first project that we did together. And this piece was called Notes from Lesson Zero, so it was basically a response to the book Notes on Lesson Zero, but it was also about Trajal's ideas about performing coolness, about runway style, about fashion. It's almost impossible for me to describe his work without you seeing it, although I can tell you that it doesn't look like dance in any conventional way. There's nobody doing pirouettes or movement. It's conventional movement, walking, or sometimes there's gymnastics. But the space is St. Mark's Church in New York. So there's a producing company called Dance Space Project. So they hired Trajal to do this, and so I worked with them. So we had a white marley floor, and then we had these towels on the floor, which actually came from a David Hockney painting that has inspired us. Because a lot of the work has to do with performing coolness, we had found an image in British Vogue that I don't have here to show you that had showed a photographer's studio, and the photographer photographing a model in front of a seamless backdrop. So this was the first project where we did that. So we actually went and we bought a seamless background paper and used high boys or grip equipment and sort of created this sort of language. So this was sort of a runway, if you will, for the dancers to come out. I feel like I should have a video. I should. Although I think at this time, this was 2004. I don't think a video exists. Maybe it does. And then this was the third project we did together. So this is Show Pony, and this is actually travels around and has been a lot of places, and I've traveled with it before. So this is Trajal right here. The way that this piece works is it's a long runway, and it's just two pieces of black marley. Marley, if you don't know, is a special dance floor. It's a vinyl, and marley is sort of it's like Kleenex. It's the brand name, but Marley is actually made by a lot of different people. And you see this, so this is the tape. So there's two long pieces, right? So if you go see the ballet, look at the stage, and you'll see lines, usually running horizontally, and that's where they tape together the marley. Because the tape is usually cloth tape. It doesn't usually have the same sheen as the marley. And then you'll notice, so this is the same structure as we saw here, right? Except for with these images printed on them, and shorter. And so this is Trajal. And the way the audience is arranged in this is it's 50 seats. It performs for no more than 50, which is a huge programming issue, because a lot of dance curators would like to present this to crowds of 75. And no, Trajal will not have it. So only 50 people, 25 on each side. And when the dance begins, Trajal comes and he sits in every single person's lap and works his way around. And then about halfway through the second section, he gets up and then the dance starts. His reason being that you think he's going to sit in every single person's lap. And so when he actually does not complete the circle, it's a surprise. And I think that's a retort to performance artists of an earlier generation, whose a lot of their work was about endurance and counting. And here they're dancing. This is Christina, another one of the dancers. A lot of her movement is there's sort of ballroom movement, and trousers. There's a lot of gymnastics there, and this I don't know what that was. And then at the other end, this is RP, so rear projection screen material, and this was a slideshow that was made by an artist named David Berger, who lives in France. And later on, there's actually like for 20 minutes of this piece, and I'm not joking, you watch 20 minutes of the movie American Gigolo. And it's projected right here where the slideshow is, yeah. Anyways, it's a great piece. And then and this is my favorite piece I've ever worked on, which is Quartet for the End of Time, which was a dance theater workshop. And we did this in Poland and other places, and our premiere was in New York. And when the dance begins, you come into a completely dark space. And all you see is at first these faces projected. They're projected on black screen, and I'll show you. And this is from an Incubus video. But at this point, as an audience, you don't know what's really going on. And his pieces are getting long. This piece was like 2 hours. The one that we just did is 2 hours and 40 minutes without an intermission. So maybe he's getting durational too. And then after the video's over, the music, which is Messiaen's Quartet for the End of the Time, starts. And then you gradually begin to discern the structure, which again is the grip stands, right? And then this is actually forms a box, which you'll see better. Whoa. So there's actually 4 sides. And I spent a lot of my time just getting those grip to make sure each grip stand was exactly the same and was exactly the right height. And then we had to have these are black scrim. If you don't know what scrim is, it's just basically it's a diaphanous fabric. And you light it from one side and it looks opaque, and if you light it from the back and it looks translucent. As you know, fabric, if it's unsupported on the side, will sort of hourglass. So it's bending there, but it could have been a lot worse. So I was very happy with this. But the actual dance piece really just consists of dancers. They just walk into the box and they do very simple movement like kneeling, standing, sitting, lying down, and they take off their clothes and they put back on their clothes and they fold up their clothes. This is it. And dance theater workshop. This is the Black Marley down here. They no longer have this because we just worked there and they have a black linoleum floor, which is genius if you ask me. But see here, you can see that tape I was talking about. This was lit by a lighting designer named Thomas Dunn, who I work with a lot. I appreciate it. And you'll see there's no masking on there's no black, a lot of times in the theater they hang blacks on the sides to hide and say it's off stage, and there's none of that. It's just the space is what it is. We're doing time. This is, I don't have good photos, but this is the most recent piece that we did, and this is from Stockholm, but this is called, this is called Antigone Jr., or 20 Looks from Paris's Burning. But basically this is just a floor of runways, which is actually this paper. So it's the same seamless paper, not the same color, but the paper that we used before, and it's a folded paper column. Okay. And then this is, I brought in really quickly just some sort of fun things that I've done that I enjoyed. Just to sort of show you kind of some of the experiences I've had. So for example, I was in LA and I saw this relief on the side of the building, which then became this in a drawing, which then became part of this wall. So this was work I did for a play, that was set in LA in the 1930s, called Once in a Lifetime, as you can read down here. And then this is the scene, so this, it's a screwball comedy, and it sort of wanted to be that. But I had a lot of pleasure sort of working with those details and working with artists, artisans, journeymen and craftspeople who could carve those sorts of things. And then also, like, for example, so this scene is actually supposed to be a film studio in the 1930s. And it's a scene with a lot of doors slamming, obviously. So that's why there's, just 6 doors, and there's people that are running in and out all the time. And we have an airplane up ahead. This was a projection up here. But there was a receptionist desk here. And, I would have never expected myself to design that. But she's supposed to be, this isn't the receptionist isn't there, but there's supposed to be the receptionist who really doesn't do anything. She's really lazy and she's ineffectual. Maybe some, but she, so I was like, well, we need just like a ridiculous desk for this woman that like doesn't work. And so I remember thinking, well, maybe it should just be like a little curve of celluloid film. And this is like, here it is, like the horrible, stupid, I brought in some like embarrassing sketches that I wouldn't care. But like this, like became this, right? So I drew this, and then they actually made it, and it kind of looked like that, It's always like shocking, it's still shocking me still when you like show up and the thing like looks like how you meant it to. It's really quite wonderful, yeah. This is the actual, this is the theater that was on my set. This theater company where the set is at, they run their shows in rep with other shows. So you so basically it'll be like one night, one thing, and the next night another. So you can't, your set can't permanently be there, meaning it all has to move every day. So you have to make some concessions. You can't have everything seamless. It can't weigh 1 million pounds, just a lot of things that you would do otherwise you have to do differently. Yeah, and these are, I know, the Charlie Bar chair, I'm sorry. Or for example, this was a piece that I was working in La Traviata and I saw this chandelier. This is what I was saying, I'm gonna bear witness to me just copying things. But I saw the chandelier. I was like, well, that would be great, so why don't I just draw that and maybe they'll build it, right? So that became this, right? And let me tell you, when I sent this drawing in, I got phone calls yelling, saying that they were never gonna build this, that they couldn't afford it, that this and that, which for some reason I knew to ignore, and lo and behold, they made it. Yeah. My best piece of advice I can give you is if you can draw it, they will build it. And if you really take the time to do it, it really, really, the craftspeople you work with, they just, I think, even though they may not say this, they really respect it. And it really just, it will do all the talking for you. So if you spend the time drawing it. I brought in some of my hand drafting too, which I sometimes hand draft, and so you'll see a little bit of that as well. This was a production of La Traviata that I worked on, and this space became that space, but I don't want to talk about that. And another example of just completely horrible copying, but this was, I designed a exhibition at the Cantor Arts Center at Stanford of 2 photographers. One was Helen Levitt, who is the woman who took this photograph, and the other one was a photographer named Leah Rubenfine. And the curator I worked with really loved this. Catherine, what do we call that? We called it when we were working on this project. We called it a portico too, but I knew that was wrong, but we still did. Yeah. So this is actually one of the photographs that was in the exhibit, but then this became that. And this was actually made, that was just like foam. And we had a scrim. So there were two, it was basically this long gallery and we had this scrim in the middle. So this is plastic scrim. So the scrim I showed you before that was on that box, that was like, that was cotton scrim that was dyed black. And then this is more like what you've seen, right? Like on like banners out in front of the building. Plastic with little holes in it, right? But we did, you know, and you can see the plastic has a lot less of the hourglassing, right? But we wanted to have, you know, one artist's name printed on one side and the other artist's name on the other side, and hanging in the middle of the gallery. That was like the single most difficult like thing to explain, you know, to be like, no, we need, because this was actually printed on this side. Helen Levitt and Leo Rubinstein was printed on the other side, and the name just like bled through. It's not like that's like gray. Does that make sense? So it's like a simple idea, but it's like hard to like convey that, and it's like, can you print it on both sides? You know, because this piece of plastic is pretty expensive. Yeah, and to get them to hang it like that. Yeah, so just more of that exhibit. And this is some dance work I've done. I want to skip through that. So this is the project that I brought that I thought I would just. How long do I have until?
You're fine.
Okay. So I'm just gonna guide you through my process about kind of like what I do when I work on a show. And again, this is not because I think that this is like the most wonderful thing that ever happened, but I think that this is a very like good example of like what you could expect. Being a set designer and how I'd approach it. So the first thing that you get when you work on a show is you get a script. And this is, so I just was like, I'm gonna bring it and show you. This is what I come up face to face with, right? So this was a play that I worked on, and this playwright Rajiv is kind of a big deal now, and had a play on Broadway. So the play that we were doing, I hadn't heard of, but I knew that Rajiv was a big deal. And then, so this is the page 2, right? Characters present, high school in America. You know, and I'm thinking, well, you know, like now when I read a script and I'm trying to decide if I want to do the job, you know, it's a big question, like whether like, you know, I try to think about whether this is good for, like a good project for me. Is it a good fit? Like, not will it be easy, like it could challenge me, but like, do I get it? You know, and so I went to high school in America, so maybe I can get it. And then this, we're not gonna go further than this, but just really quickly, so. The office of a vice principal of public high school, modest and simple, you know. So playwrights, you know, there's no rule about what they have to say in their script about the play setting. They could say a lot and they could say a little. You don't know, okay? So you have to just sort of be able to roll with it. You know, every situation is different. So this is literally what I came face to face with. I just also want to mention that, so this play, like the script, so this was the first time that this play was ever being produced, like no one had ever done it before. So I knew that I was the first designer to ever make a set for it, which is really a wonderful opportunity, I think, because you really get to put your stamp on the design. You know, a lot of people ask me is like, you know, like if you're doing like, say you're doing a set for like, I don't know, West Side Story, like are you gonna go look at like all the other West Side Stories out there? You know, and it's kind of a little bit like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I try not to, but sometimes you have to. And so after I read the script, usually the first thing that I do, well, I'm skipping a major part here because what you would usually do after reading the script is you talk to the director, okay? And the way that theater is structured, particularly in the US, is that it's a director's project. So a director could say, you know, I want this play, I think that this play is about, I think it should all be read, and you know, I think that, you know, it's it's about hell, really. You know, like the director may guide you in a certain direction, or could in fact tell you, you know, like they could say, I want it to be red. And the power structure is such that, I mean, this would never happen, but they could make it red. Like they could tell the painters to paint it because they're above you. So you have to work with the director. That said, sometimes some directors have a lot of ideas, and some directors seem to, well, let me phrase it differently. Some directors seem to have a lot of ideas about the physical set, and some directors don't seem to have a lot. So you have to come to the table being prepared either to sort of like respond and take in somebody else's ideas, or if they don't say a lot, you have to be able to sort of show up and be like, hey, look, I think we could do this. So you have to be able to read a play and be like, oh, I think that, you know, it should all be blue, or hopefully you have motivating factors for what you do. And I'll sort of explain to you what some of mine were. In this play, it just has two people in it. And it's a drama about a school cheating scandal. And it's very, very heavy and serious. You know, and so I looked at a lot of, usually the first thing I do is just look at research, literal research. So I'm not designing anything. I just want to know what that world is out there. And at this point, I'm very careful to look at things even if I think I know them. So it's like, yeah, I went to high school in the US, you know, but like I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look at pictures again anyways, because I find a lot of times I don't remember things exactly the same way as I think I do. And this project in particular, there's a part in the play where, which is set in the vice principal's office, where there is revealed to be a tunnel, like a nuclear war safety tunnel. That's a leftover from the Cold War. And this tunnel, like the opening to the tunnel, is hid behind a map. And it's sort of kind of out there. And apparently in earlier versions of the play, there had been like a scene where the characters actually like went in the tunnel. But by the time I got the script, he just sort of like moves the map away, and you see this like tunnel door. You know, and it's very like a little sci-fi, you know, like I wasn't expecting that. But that sort of meant that whatever this high school was, it had been built during the Cold War, right? So I was thinking it was built, you know, late 50s or the 60s. And in fact, and I do this a lot, is I try to usually, like, even if it's not exactly the same thing, I like to substitute things that I can refer to from my own personal experience for the thing that's referred to in the script. So in this case, there was a high school in Palo Alto called Coverly, which is now closed. And I'm born and raised in Palo Alto, and I know a lot about it. And so I lived near where this high school was, and it had these hexagonally shaped buildings. And kind of to me, that's like what high schools look like, and it wasn't until later on that I figured out they were different. But I use the school, Coverly, as sort of my stand-in for what the one might be in the play. And then I also looked at just boring, like these is like whatever internet pictures you might find. But like this kind of stuff, like this boring stuff, you know, I spent a lot of my job actually like finding that stuff. Like the files and the folders and the desk, and not that desk, the bad desk, and the, you know, to make something like look that boring is actually really hard. And you also have to be prepared, because you work, you know, like you'll have props people and multiple props people working under you, and you have to be able to like refer them to specific things. You know, you can't say like, just kind of go get that. You know, you have to be like, get these binders. No, not all the same color. Also, the school where this is set is a public high school, and I went to public high school, so I'm not like knocking them, but like I believe like, you know, it's not going to look quite as like sexy as a private school might look. So I did the research, even if it's really boring, and usually I'll stumble upon one piece of research that to me is kind of an aha moment, and I found this piece of research. Which, you know, is this sort of partially glazed wall leading into an office. And I said, wow, this is really cool, like windows, On the inside, you can see these reflections of these light fixtures here, right? You know, because the play that I was working on had only 2 people in it, and they're in one room. So if you think about a stage, like most stages that I work on are like, I don't know, like 30, like the proscenium, right, which is the arch, will be like 30 feet wide, you know, like 40, you know, or 36. Yeah, 30, ACT's 36. What I'm trying to say, the stage is usually larger than a room in real life would be. So if you're trying to do a set that's like naturalistic or realistic, and referring to a real room, your set might be smaller than the stage. So how are you going to negotiate that? Are you just going to have this whole thing like floating out there? And I'll show you what I did. And so this is like, you know, I don't want to bore you to death, but I just want to show you like how, like literally like how this happened. So this was, usually I start out doing some sort of like rough ground plan thing. So I'll sort of say, hey, we could do it like this, or we could do it like this, or we could do it like this. You know, I tend to do this a lot, and I'm just saying this right now, but I do, you know, like I really want to believe in the architecture of that room, you know, and like if I think that like if it's like a rectangularly shaped room, I don't want to put like an angle, like I don't want to like splay the walls like this just because like that's like better sight lines and like that's like the theater-y thing to do. So like one way to solve that is like sometimes like like the walls are you know right angles to each other, but the whole thing's at an angle. Oh, and this is what I was going to say before, but like I realized I was like, oh, if you have these windows, then you could have like a room, but then you could also see beyond into another room or to a hallway, and that might be able to sort of evoke the life of the school. So like right in like even just like that one simple little idea and this one piece of research, for me that was like enough to just sort of start to go ahead and say, look, we're going to do an office, but it's going to have a window that looks out onto a hallway, and we'll see movement of the school. And so these rough ground plans became slightly more precise. So here you can see a little bit of hand drafting. I actually did this one while I was working on another job, so I was out of town, and I was like doing this in a hotel room, I remember. So usually I'll try to make them more precise. Here's a horrible sketch. And then I'll make it like a white model. So here's a white model. And I don't remember exactly how many I made, but just trying to sort of mass it out. Get it? When I took this photo, I never thought I would be showing it to anybody ever, except for myself. I used to show like all my stuff all the time, and now like the more I work, I like to get it all right myself and then show it to the directors. And then I made a color model. So this is that. Yeah. This is like the map. So the things behind there. So like this right here, that's like the reverse of that piece was right. Get it? And here's like the model from the top. So this is the ceiling piece like lying over there. So this hallway, which has this angle, and there's like a trophy case. Can you all tell what you're looking at, right? Yeah. So it's a color quarter-inch model, and then so there was a ceiling over the hallway, but I took that off to take the picture. But then there wasn't a ceiling over the room part. Okay, and the reason for that was I wanted to hang these fluorescents in the hallway, but I also wanted to give it this real like pressurized, intense, high school environment feeling. Yeah. And also like, if you put a ceiling on a set, it can't be lit. How do I say this? Are there any lighting designers here that I might offend? But if you put a ceiling on a set, it has to be lit like a real room would be lit. Because it's not like a TV show where you have this, like, on the stage you have this big grid and you can put lights from like any angle, right? But if you have a ceiling, that prevents that. Actually, Alfred Hitchcock is like really famous for having like nailed down ceilings on top of his sets to give it that, what we would call a film noir look, which really just means like that the light is like heavily focused through real, like the real ways the light would get into the room. So kind of by putting a ceiling there, it forced the lighting designer to have to light the hallway that way. But then I left this part open above the office. so that the actors who were down here could be better lit most of the time. So the lighting designer could get in from those angles. So this black thing, we call that a portal. I don't know what you call it. But so that's basically like, so there's the theater proscenium usually. Like, I mean, theater can be done anywhere. You know, it's not always a proscenium theater, but let's just say, you know, it's often done in a proscenium theater. So you can't, since a proscenium is an architectural element, you can't change it, right? That's the room. You can't move it. So if you want to control the size of the opening that you're working, I mean, it's very basic, but you make this thing called a portal. So it's basically just a frame within a frame. And like a black velour or black serge portal is a common way to go. It can be whatever you want. That very, the one I showed you, the Moliere, with the parquet floor, like that had a portal, but it was all like, had lots of decorative painting on it. I could show you it again. Yeah. And I remember we had to rent lockers and we couldn't get blue lockers. And for some reason I felt like they had to be blue. And so I was like, we have to put contact. Anyways, they found blue lockers. There it is from above. The thing about the portal, it's funny because they didn't really start using them until, I think it was like, you know, beginning of the 20th century. And then I just brought this up for fun. So like, part of my job is you have to tell the painters how to paint it. So like, for example, like for the floor, like this is like the floor at Thrift Town at like 16th and Mission, right? And these are like, those are my shoes, my boat shoes, right? So like, so I literally like took this and I gave this to the painters to get like, you know, because I was like, where am I gonna find that crazy floor? I spent a lot of time running around town, taking pictures of things, and then giving them to painters. And then there's a picture of the actual set. So there's the opening to the tunnel, right? You know, and the CMU, of course, is just vacuum foam. I forget if it was, I think it was vacuum foam. There's a lot of new products out there now. You'll notice the rug follows a line of this wall. And I mentioned before that this high school that had been in my mind had hexagonally shaped structures. So I really used that architecture to sort of inspire this turn in the wall, which is helpful because it's good for sightline. So if an actor has to sit at a desk, if they're turned at 45 degrees, they can play to an actor across them, but they can also play to you, the audience, right? You know, I try to figure out ways of like making it friendly for the actors, but then also like you don't want it to look like a play before it started. You know, and sometimes if it's like at certain angles, I think it can look that way. You know, also having like chairs and a table on the side gave a place so that like they could do part of the scene over here, and then they could move over here. Because I think you have to think, like a director and actors, like, they're on stage for 90 minutes. What are they gonna do? They're stuck in that room. You know, so that you have to have things for them to go to, or that would motivate them to cross the room. This is a project I did recently in Mountain View, which was set in is a play called Time Stands Still, and it's set in a warehouse industrial loft in Williamsburg. And I'm not making, I believe that's exactly what it said in the directions in the script. And the woman the main character in the play is a photojournalist who spends most of her time away from home and comes home and is very committed to her work and has lots of problems because of that. And so here's some more pictures of that. So I had a lot of fun with this project, particularly because if you haven't noticed, like industrial design is like really big. Like right now, like if I like offend anybody, like just stop me. But like like Pottery Barn or like the Nate Burkett show, like it'll be like industrial, you know. And when the playwright says it's like an industrial warehouse space, he doesn't mean like she bought stuff from Pottery Barn. He means like they actually live in a space that used to be a factory, like maybe in the late 19th century, and got turned into a space where people now live. So I've really wanted to create that feeling. And you know, Williamsburg has a lot of brick, and these sort of warehouse, these windows are everywhere. So this back wall is, you know, painted, but it's supposed to look like board form concrete, and a column with a beam. Well, notice this light fixture here. We'll talk about this in a second. These are like ripped off fake Donald Judds. I apologize. And these are quickly just some ground plans. I won't go into these. This I brought in just to show you like a quick. So a lot of times I'll do like a white study model. So I guess the one I showed you before wasn't. This one is 1/8 inch, so it's like really small. In a large, you know, I was sort of trained at the Yale School of Graduate School. We all have to do 1/8 inch white models, and it's sort of like I still do that. And it's a good way to get a feel for it. You can sort of give it to the director, and then you can work on the more elaborate 1/4 inch one. So this was that. And I use a lot of my own drafting and just scale it down, and then twin tack it and cut it out and make it. And then this is some of my hand drafting. So here you see a room at an angle, surprise, and here's a portal. This theater, which is in Mountain View, it's like a lot of theaters that were built like, I don't know, post World War II or whatever. They do a lot of like ones that like can be like they're configurable, so they could be like a proscenium or they could not, blah blah blah. And so sometimes you end up like. It's kind of a neither fish nor fowl situation, and you have to sort of like take the reins and just sort of like make it be one or the other. So putting in the portal can help with that. This is a white bounce. So we had those warehouse windows along here, right? So I shouldn't say we didn't have enough money, but I didn't want to spend our time and energy like painting like a backdrop that looked like Williamsburg, so we just did a white bounce out there that just gave diffuse white light against those windows, and I just prayed and hoped nobody got bothered by that section. What's this one? Walls. Fox Studios B. They told me, they were like, oh, we have this brick in stock. Fox Studios B, and if you use the theater company, and they were like, if you use it, then you get it for free. So I was like, okay, fine. You know, I sometimes feel like kind of a chump for just like letting that happen. But you know, like I did make them like turn the brick on the reveal. You know, and this sort of like chiller unit. I actually saw that in Dog Patch. I was riding my bike past and some like flower or like some importer space had their rolling door open and there was a big chiller hanging there, and I just took a photograph of it. And this is a good example of if you draw it, they might build it, though they will build it, you know, because I drew this. I think I did another more specific drawing of it. You know, but I was like, I wasn't sure if the shop was gonna build it, and they ended up building it just like that. You know, I brought this in just because this was what I was talking about, like industrial design is in now. And so when I was doing this show, I felt very compelled to make sure that that everything that this character owned was real in and of itself, was not like a fake industrial thing, like had really been the thing that it is purporting to be. Like these sawhorses were actually pipe sawhorses from the time that they were intended. So I'll show you. I'm almost done here. You know, so for example, so I saw these I was in Santa Fe and I saw these sawhorses, and we just remade those at like a larger scale. Right? good job. And there's just some concrete and some brick, you know. And here's like, I mean, this is like the best research in the world, right? Like, you know, how does this go together? Yeah, so I just copied that. Just I saw this in the mission. And a door. You know, how do the windows, how do the mullions come together? And pipe railing. You know, there's my Donald J. copies. Yeah, and here, this lamp. This was this lamp I saw in Interior Design magazine. This is Marcel Wanders, and I really wanted that, and of course it cost like thousands and thousands of dollars. And so then they showed me this lamp, because I had originally I was like, I don't want any IKEA on the set. And they found this one, and I was like, oh, it looks very similar to it. And I was like, where'd you get it? And they're like, IKEA. And so then I like had to make this decision, like, well, should I not do it because I said no IKEA, or should I just like? I mean, I love IKEA, but you know, it's like once you know. Anyways, sorry if you take it with a grain of salt. Yeah. That's what I have. This is by no means like all of. I've done too much work, and I probably. Said enough already, but hopefully you have some questions and maybe I can answer them. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to go back and show you the first image. Right, so this here, there's actually two portals here. So this is a gray velour, right, and shaped like that. Which the lighting designer hated, and then there's this one. And they're both at these angles, and so that was painted like that. And then the proscenium you don't see is not there. Oops. No questions? Yeah?
When designing a space for a set, how much influence do you have on how the actors will move around in the space?
You have a lot of influence in the US. Typically, a set is designed and built before rehearsals even start. So you and a director have to make those decisions in the beginning, but you do it with a director. I think that if you made bad decisions, you probably wouldn't get hired. So you have to think like what's moved, you know. But I know that like I don't know if this is why you're asking the question, but I know in like Europe, for example, their economic structure for theater is different, and they're able to sort of like, they can rehearse a piece and then they can sort of influence the design, and there's a little bit more back and forth. We can't pay, like in the US, they can only pay the actors for a certain time, you know. I should say that like, as much as I want things to look a certain way, and like I'll have an idea about like a space and how it feels, like if an actor's up there and they can't move or something's impeding them, it feels horrible. So I really want to make that happen, you know. I wouldn't say that I design from like an actor's perspective. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked on something where you've seen the performance and then designed to that?
Like my dance work, for example, largely happens that way. And part of the reason is because most of the dance projects I've done are developed through residencies. So they'll like dance companies will actually like pay like me to come and like watch rehearsal. Yeah. I mean, I'd say like, I mean, I'm an American designer for hire, and I do what I need to do. But I don't feel like one way is better than the other necessarily. You know, I mean, I guess like it's good to have feedback, but plays not so much. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I wish I did didn't have, like, there's certainly been projects where I wish I didn't have as much responsibility as I did, you know, because I feel like I don't want to make that decision, like, you know, I'm going to tell you what it looks like, but, like, I don't want to be, like, responsible for, like, you know, whether this boat's, you know, sinks or sails, you know, so.
There must be safety considerations along with exits and entries for the actors and all of those things, which are there certain codes that you have to live by or design to always, or how does that work?
Yes, but I think, you know, I've never read the laws actually. I mean, they're conveyed to me, but I haven't read them firsthand. A lot of it is to protect the audience. So the actors, there could be like a big fire on stage, and the fire curtain would come down, and like everybody behind, like on stage, would like die, like you know. But as long as the audience gets like okay. There are a lot of fire code concerns. For example, in the dance work that I showed, like all this paper, this fire code. It's like so like all this paper, right, is flame retardant paper. You have to buy from a special vendor, you get a special certificate. Anytime there's a piece of fabric on stage, you have to show those things. You have to maintain a fire aisle, so you have to, 44 inches usually. It depends on what city you're in between the knees of the front row and the edge of your performance stage. There might be others. I think that legally, like the designers aren't. I shouldn't say I think. I know that the designers don't have the responsibility for that exactly as the theater company itself. So I'm like wanting you don't worry too much about it, but you have to follow the rules. I'm trying to think of a good example of like when there was something I really wanted to do design wise that. Oh, here's a good example. So. You can't tell because there's no ground plan, but so there's a proscenium arch on this stage, like about here, right? But this plywood tongue, like the plywood stage, sticks out in front of that, right? So every set has to allow for a fire curtain to come down, and it has to make a complete seal with the floor, so that there's no fire or noxious gases could come through. So instead of just raking, instead of just putting this plywood thing at an angle, they had to build the whole floor and the entire stage at an angle, so that there wouldn't be little sections on the side open. And there's a lot of things. There's kind of a lot of things like that. And the reason why design-wise, I quite like it. It's just it's a lot more expensive, and you have to pay for it all out of your budget. Yeah, all this muslin was flame-proofed. All these little stools were sprayed, flame-proofed.
That's interesting. So really, even when you're trying to create a residential interior for a set, you are designing with somewhat a book of codes that you would use in commercial spaces. So, that's essentially what you have to do here.
I guess. It's all safety. I haven't worked enough in commercial design to know. I always imagined there was a lot more. But,
Fire codes, like the fire retardant fabrics, etc., all that would be part of the commercial code.
The big one in theater is fire code, definitely. Maybe it's that way and other disciplines too, but it's the fire marshal may show up at any second. You don't know if he's going to show up and he's going to shut you down, so you better watch out,
So have you ever had to adjust a stage design after it's done and you've watched it in action?
Because of fire code or because
because of practicality for the actors, or the effect is not what you wanted, or...
Oh, I'm sure all the time. I think that if you couldn't...
after the show opens.
Oh, never. Wait, the opening night, I'm done. I walk away, and I don't come back. I'm paid, they give me my final third, because designers just get paid in thirds, right? You get a third when you sign, you get a third when you turn your drawings in, and then you get a third on opening night. And you never come back. Yeah, but we also have a generous period of time, so we have a time, usually like the 10 or so days prior to opening, where you're heavily involved, and if problems come up, they're expected to come up during that time. So it's not like you just turn in a design and walk away. You're there to like make sure it all works. Yeah, but I've never after opening, I would feel like I mean, maybe something's happened, but I don't know. I'm sure I've had to adjust designs. I mean, I know I have, like for budget reasons, you know, I've designed shows that were too expensive, you know. But I designed plenty of shows where I design kind of what I want, and it just gets built that way. Generally, for each company I work for, I have, it's a little hard to explain, but bear with me, like I have just sort of a general idea of like what the production level is. You know, so it'll be like, that's a big theater company, so we can do more, and it's a medium-sized theater company, so we can do a little bit, but not too much, you know, or, but I don't design ever with, by like itemizing expenses exactly. So, and I don't think other set designers do as well. I know costume designers tend to be more line item oriented in terms of exact expenses. So usually the game is you're trying to get away with as much with as little repercussion as possible and get the other people to be responsible. I'm just telling you what I want it to look like, you know. Actually, theater is very interesting that way because ultimately what you care is what it looks like. The audience, well, there are times of, I guess, you know, different kinds of theater, but typically an audience doesn't touch the scenery. So, I mean, do you really care if that's plywood, or do you just care if it really looks like plywood? You know? Yeah.
What would you say is the most important detail that you work with?
Detail.
Yeah, like either whether it's in the script or in the material or in a photograph.
You mean like in general or like a specific?
Both general and specific, maybe like inspirational detail. You know, it seems like you work a lot from, say, found photographs or research of photographs. Of
Yeah, like, I don't know how, you know, I mean, I guess of course I've designed, like the Moliere, obviously, photography didn't exist. I mean, I feel like you always have to find a convincing phrase, a convincing, for me it's usually a piece of research, and that's the way I am, you know, operating. I was gonna say though that when you first asked the question, my response is gonna be like, the most important detail is like the one that you care about like the most. And I don't mean that like to be stupid, but like, I just feel like I've learned over time that like, the things that make me the most unhappy, like, is like if something is not built the way that I want it to be, and a million people could say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nobody's noticing that. I will just burn up inside." You know. So like, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's important. What it matters is that it's important to you, and you have to like be right with it. So that's kind of like how I operate. Like I'm like. I ask myself a lot, I'm like, does it bother me or does it not bother me? Like, am I, you know, like I try to be clear with myself on that. But I wouldn't say that my most important details are necessarily like the directors, you know. Clearly directors see a different thing, you know. They're like, oh, did you notice so-and-so was doing such a bad job tonight? And I'm like, oh God, I only noticed, you know, that the wall was painted the wrong color or something, you know, yeah. Does that answer your question or was it?
I mean, it was sort of, it had a wide breadth to the question.
Yeah.
Well, there was one other source that you didn't really discuss, your collection of vintage magazines.
Well, I don't have like a true collection. I'm a hoarder, like, I have a magazine problem. I do. No, but yeah, I think because I do enjoy research a lot, I tend to hold on to a lot of magazines, probably more than I should, thinking, oh, someday that's gonna, you know, come into use. You know, and sometimes it does. Yeah, there was a picture I showed you. This was from one of my hoarding magazines. This is from World of Interiors, which is a great magazine, I think. I don't know what other people say.
Which are the other magazines that you hold? That would be a useful thing to know.
Make me say this. I really like Vogue magazine, American Vogue, and I like it because it's commercial. Like I'm not like into fashion, but I think it's like great to like look at it because it's about fashion, but it's also about like commerce and business because they're selling products and there's ads. There's like so like I don't know. I think it's really like vibrant because of that. You know, I think to me that magazine is alive in a real way that like some sort of like Marty periodicals aren't. I think. You know, I mean, I'm embarrassed because I've never studied interior design and I don't even know what like the conversation is, but like some American interior design magazines like send me up the wall. Like, you know, if they refer to, like Hollywood Regency as like a style from the 70s or like, you know, what's the word for you know I'll think of it in a second. Yeah, but there's like there's always like things I get like upset about because I'm like why would they say that, you know? But I think it's important that like in whatever way that you like to look at the world, that you do that. I know myself, like I don't do a lot of I don't know, what do you guys do this here at CCA? Did you do like mood boards? Is that like even like set or is that
A little bit.
a little bit?
We
Yeah.
don't call them mood boards.
Okay.
We do, yeah.
I mean, I don't either, but it's like in the
Well,
past
like
couple of
you're
years.
calling it research, right? Or,
Yeah.
Or sort of context for an idea. We do that.
Yeah.
For
I
sure.
think it's because of like Project Runway and some of the shows they call it mood boards on television. So yeah, but I don't do that because like for me, like I need a certain simplicity of looking at things, and I just don't work that way. But you know, I'm trying to like I need to experience Pinterest. I would like to, you know.
I was going to ask, well, so I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
But talking about Pinterest, I'm curious how you organize all of this content. Because you do a lot of research for every single show that's very distinct, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a process for that, or is it sort of you're
Very
starting
interesting you
new?
should ask. I have a lot. I keep. I'm 37, but I'm very old. I guess very old-fashioned. I like to have a hard copy of my research if I can. So it means sometimes making copies of things that I probably don't need to. But then I organize it all by project. So when I'm done with the project, I file it all together and I'll put the research together and I'll keep a lot of my sketches and I'll keep the drawings. But I tend to remember, like I'll know, and it's because I'm crazy and hopefully we're all crazy in the same way, but I'll remember like, oh, yeah, I saw that thing on that project, and then I can go back to that project because that's the way that I remember it. And then I do have a pile, I do have a folder for just kind of like, occasionally I find like an image that I really like and I just keep it in that pile, but that isn't actually that big. I tend to be very like project by project. One thing I wanted to say was, when I started out doing set design, I came from architecture and the thought of like, even like talking about like molding or like, I took like art history and like classicism once, but like, just my eyes have been widely opened by working on these like shows, like in many ways, like doing all these different projects, because a lot of them have been set in different countries at different times, have been really a really wonderful way to sort of get to know times and periods. And I'm really surprised at it about like how over time, just how much I know. And I'm not saying that I know more than other set designers, I think we all do, but it's kind of what I was saying before, you really look at stuff a lot, you improve without even noticing that you're getting better, and there's still room to grow. Yeah.
And then I have another question unrelated to the record keeping, but
Yeah.
related to how you actually fabricate these sets and who you work with to do that. Is it theater company based? Do you know what skills they have on hand when you go into it? Do you have to hire people to do things that they maybe don't know how to do?
Yes.
What's that process?
Well, like if you're a professional set designer, meaning like you're being paid for it, the theater would provide a shop that would have artisans. So there are carpenters. As a set designer, you work with the carpenters, the painters, and the props people. And the props, they do soft goods within that. So you really have a lot to do, and you kind of have to tell them all what to do. And larger theaters will have larger staffs, and small theaters will have smaller. Like at this point, I don't do a show. I wouldn't do a job if there wasn't if they didn't have the people in those departments, just because it would not be a good experience. In response to your question, what sort of is interesting to me is, I think because in the world, well, this is how I see it, but I think when you work in theater, you spend the first 10 years doing it all yourself, and if you're a costume designer, you're sewing the costumes yourself at home, or you're I painted 1,000,002 shows, and I'm not showing you all the basement stuff I did, so I spent a lot of time doing all that kind of stuff, and so you're sort of scrambling to get away from that, and so when you get, I'm not saying I don't want to come off I think that I don't like making things, because I do very much, and I do make a lot of things, and I work with my hands. It's just that you realize as a designer, the skill that you cultivate is conveying information to work with these really talented people. That's what you're good at, not making it yourself. The painters I work with are better painters than I am. And it's such a pleasure to work with them. So you're trying to get out of making it, in a sense. I don't want that to sound like being lazy. But I have noticed that in contemporary American culture, there definitely is a strong DIY, people want to make stuff with their hands, and so I try to. I'm for that, and I do that, but I'm not things.
But do you feel like that set of skills is transferable? I'm seeing two directions where it could go. The discussion about setting the mood, it seems really clear from your work that you have this ability to extract, say, from a photo like that, the candelabra, and say that's going to evoke the mood, rather than taking a chair or some kind of ceiling motif, right? And so the capacity for, say, an object to set a mood, or some kind of spatial configuration to set a mood for a space, that seems like a really transferable skill to interior design, or maybe to film, sets for film. How do you see?
Oh, I hope so.
How do you see your set of skills, moving in other directions?
Oh, I would love to do things in other directions. And it's just you end up, you got one job because you got the other, and so it's an interesting sequence. I'm a little bit here I am talking to you all, but I'm sort of how did this all happen? How did, last I knew I was doing the play at, school, and now, it's a job, and then you wonder, But I do think I hope it's transferable, because I like to think I did other things, I'm also, I should say too, that I always have thought of myself as a designer first. And that I think I understand theater, but I've never been theater is my first love, and design, I like opera and dance actually better than other plays, but anyways. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.